They told me last week that this room had a 400-person capacity, which is a lot of copies when you don't work for the school system anymore and you can't make free copies when nobody's looking. So we do have paper copies, but if you have a device and you're cool with it, if you want to scan the QR code, it will take you to my website. You can get the slides right there. Right below where the slides are is the link to the handout. And then there's also, the handout is actually 2 pages because we're in a workshop type environment. There's a 1-pager that just is a condensed version of it too. So all of that's available on the QR code if you want to grab it. If you want a paper copy, she's going around, just raise your hand when she gets over here. I don't want your hands to lose feeling because you got them up so long, but yeah, there's, I don't know, is there 100 people in here? There's 100 copies, so we'll make it work. But anyway, administrative work aside, today I want to talk about the environments in the classroom, in the school system, not the student themselves, not the teacher themselves. I'm not here to point fingers at teachers. I'm not here to, try to fix any students or anything like that. But the environment has a huge impact, and a lot of times, coming from a gen ed teacher classroom. Also, I was a district administrator for the last 7 years of my career. I was in a lot of classrooms. I know a lot of teachers, met a lot of teachers, been on a lot of committees, district-wide and statewide. The environment is one of the things that, in my opinion, goes overlooked a lot of times. And looking back at me, growing up, coming through, I grew up in Aiken, South Carolina, coming up through the public ed school system and college at Clemson and things like that. Like, I can look back and see where the environment actually had a bigger impact than I realized, because I didn't know I was autistic. I didn't know I was ADHD at the time. I just knew that I struggled a lot more than my peers. And I came through gen ed. I wasn't identified or tested or anything. And looking back at my teaching career, there was I want to be careful how I say this. I have my suspicions about several students, many students that I taught in gen ed, being neurodiverse possibly. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist. I don't want to diagnose people, especially when they're not in the room. But looking at what I know now, when I was still in the classroom, yeah, they definitely were. So I want to make sure that, and I definitely was too, I don't want to miss that point, that we're all on the same page, we all have the same expectations where, I'm not addressing, high needs in a special ed classroom. I'm addressing the school environments that all teachers could make easy adjustments to, kind of discuss that kind of thing. Everybody cool with what we're on? All right, if we're not, I know she said you can't leave. I'm the teacher, I'm in charge now, right? Y'all can leave if you need to, all right? It ain't gonna hurt my feelings. So what we're gonna look at today is we're gonna kind of reframe or frame what we're gonna talk about with cognitive load, so we're all on the same page, we're all talking about the same, apples and apples, not apples and oranges. Then we're gonna kind of look at invisible demands. And some people in this room will probably, think through these scenarios and be like, yeah, absolutely, that's just, no kidding. Like, why would we even talk about this? And other people, hopefully, will gain some insight as we kind of go through some examples. We can't go through all of them, obviously, but we can go through some of them at least and kind of get the wheels spinning. The 5-lens audit, that's what the handout is. There's nothing special about 5-lens. I just thought it was a snappy way of coming up with a little title for it. But it is kind of 5 points to think about when you're talking about your environment. And one thing I wanted to mention when we're talking about that is, even if you are a super high qualified, amazing at your job, special ed teacher, inclusion teacher, anything like that, you have colleagues that probably aren't. And I'm saying that with all the respect in the world. My mom was a teacher, my grandma was a teacher, 2 cousins, 3 aunts, me. But feel free to share with those that need it. We'll talk about subtraction when we talk about implementation towards the end, where I know for a fact, as a district administrator, former district administrator, the tendency in education is to, let's add this intervention, let's add this support, let's add this, where sometimes let's just take a couple things away and we'll be so much better off. Tools and resources, and then hopefully, if I don't get sidetracked, again, I'm ADHD, I know that now. I have taken my meds today, but it doesn't mean I'm not gonna get sidetracked. So, we should have time for questions and answers at the end. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to just raise your hand, or I'll be honest with you, if you want to shout it out, that's cool. I may not hear it the first time, but after that, we'll get your questions. So why does this matter? Excuse me. I am not used to holding a mic, so I apologize for that cough. From my observations, especially as a district administrator where I was in a lot of different classrooms. I was over technology integration. I was not a technology department employee. I was over the integration part of it, the instructional technology side of it, working with teachers, teaching teachers how to use them, teaching classrooms how to use stuff. So I was in a lot of classrooms. I saw a lot of different teaching styles, a lot of different environments throughout the 7 years I was working. Plus, I was on a lot of state committees at the time. And I got to go into different schools. So it wasn't just one district that I'm talking about. It was kind of a broad shot over South Carolina public ed. I obviously didn't get to see everybody, so some people are probably better than others. But what I noticed was students in general, and we're talking about autistic students today, are judged based on what they can produce, what they can show. So when we look, see, I'm going to gesture with my hands, and I'm going to move this mic. When we look at performance-based stuff, when we look at how students behave, when we look at things that other people judge a student on, and I don't mean judge as in bad, but judge as in, did they meet this criteria? Did they meet this performance expectation? Did they do this in lab? Did they walk in a straight line in middle school? Those kinds of things, That's why it matters. The environment matters a lot when it comes to those kinds of skills. The environment matters when it comes to math, reading, that sort of thing too, but a lot of times those have interventions, those have knowledge base, those have research behind it saying, okay, if we need to bring them up in a grade level in reading, we can do this, we can do that, we can get a tutor, we can do that. But when it's other things, there's not so much sometimes. I remembered. So this is kind of a graphic of what we're gonna kind of look at, the theory behind it anyway. We have all of this invisible criteria, all these invisible things that students are having to deal with, the sensory inputs, executive functioning, working memory, that kind of thing, social demands, social decoding, all kinds of social stuff. And it doesn't have to be with the peers. It can be with teachers, administrators. That's a big piece of it too. And then transitions, which is something I know a lot of teachers, it's just not their fault, but it's not on the radar at all. So we'll talk about that. And the reason this graph, we'll see this graph again, hopefully in a different orientation towards the end. But the more those demands take, the less capacity a student has. And so if they don't have a full capacity to do the learning, something's going to give, and it's going to be the learning part of it. It's going to be their cognitive ability to process what you're teaching, process what they're reading, process what they're doing in the classroom academically, because of all these other demands that are showing up first. Or simultaneously, but usually first. So all of that's to say that some demands are structurally invisible. And that just means they're not obvious unless somebody names them. And that somebody typically would be the autistic student. And typically, if you're dealing with an autistic student who's not diagnosed, or maybe they're diagnosed and their parents don't want the school to know because they're going to be treated differently, because that's a real thing, unfortunately. You know, and even if they're, you know they're ADHD, you may not tell them, but a lot of times ADHD and autism are coexisting. Look at me. So if somebody doesn't name the demand, a lot of times, if you're not aware of it, if you don't experience it, it's not there in practice. So these are the load multipliers. I'm going to hit this real quick because I literally just went over them. But we're talking about sensory input, the working memory, that's your executive functioning, social decoding, again, that's with anybody who is, alive. And that could be a four-legged person. If there was one elementary school, the assistant principal had a farm, and he would bring in goats sometimes, and he would bring in, his dog came to school about once a week. His goats came about once a month. Every now and then he'd bring in one of the calves that his daughter was showing, so it was a very gentle cow, but so it doesn't have to be two-legged to be counted in the social decoding, although the four-legged ones tend to be a lot easier to, hang out with. Masking. Masking takes on a lot of different roles and a lot of different looks that aren't obvious sometimes. And then context shifting, which is a huge one. There's been a lot of research in that lately. If you want to know more about that, shoot me an email, catch me afterwards. I actually gave a conference presentation last September, talking a lot about context shifting and how there's a lot of unspoken in that and a lot of cognitive demand shifting back and forth. There's just, they've always known as a thing, but there's just been new research out there kind of proving what some of us already knew. So when I thought this was going to be a smaller crowd, this slide was going to be like, hey, let's break up into our elbow part. Is it still on? Oh, there it is. Maybe it was a bad spot. Break up into our elbow partners, and we'll go through a scenario, right? But this is a lot of people, and we're all spaced out, so we're going to do this together. But we're going to choose a scenario. I'm going to choose a scenario because it's going to be easier. And then we're going to kind of talk through the scenario, and what I want you guys to do is kind of think about what part of this scenario would impact academics, what part would impact executive functioning, working memory, that kind of stuff. What part of the scenario would impact your sensory inputs, and what part would be social. Easy enough? Yeah? Up and down is yes, left and right is no? Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So, God, y'all are so spread out. I don't want to be like pacing back and forth. It's not a criticism. That's a me thing. No, that's true. That's true. Okay, so we're going to get back on track before I run long. So let's just take a simple, because this could happen at the high school, at the middle school, at the elementary school, with varying caveats between the scenarios. But let's just say we're leaving math class and we're going to lunch. So that's the scenario, okay? So I'm gonna kind of walk you through it from my perspective, and then we're gonna kind of, you guys try to pick up on the things and then we'll kind of discuss it. Okay. So right before the bell rings, everybody, and I know this happened in my class, so, right before the bell rings, everybody starts packing up, right? Even though we're not supposed to, bell-to-bell instruction, but we start packing up. So I'm trying to make sure I collect all my stuff. I'm the autistic student that's not known to be autistic outside of my own head. See everybody else doing that, so I start doing it too, right? We've already checked like 3 of these boxes, by the way. That's just a clue. So we get up, We go out in the hallway. We walk down the hallway with the rest of our classmates. We have to go outside of the building to go into another building for the cafeteria at our school, okay? Let's just pretend it's the middle of August. I don't know, South Carolina, we're talking 97 degrees and 110% humidity, bright sunshine. So we leave the hallway that's hopefully air conditioned. We go outside, we walk the sidewalks, we go into the cafeteria. The cafeteria we're met with not only the people we just left math class with and the people we were in the hallway with, but now the other 3/4 of our, I don't know, let's call it 9th grade class, right? Let's just pretend our high school has 700 kids in 9th grade, okay? So we walk into the cafeteria. Now, I know all cafeterias are different, but usually you have 2 or 3 lunch lines in a cafeteria. Sometimes you'll have I know several years ago things changed a little bit, but you still sometimes have like a French fry line or a fast food line kind of thing. You might even have Chick-fil-A come in and sell during lunch, or Pizza Hut, Papa John's, things like that. So you've got 4 or 5 at least different lines. So I got to think, do I have money for lunch? Or did I bring my lunch? If I brought my lunch, did I get it out of my locker? If I did get it out of my locker, that means during the hallway, before we went outside to the cafeteria, I had to stop in my locker, I had to open my locker, I had to remember my combination, I had to think about all of that while the kids are rushing past me in the hallway, all the noise, all the talking, and I know in some middle schools, they can manage to keep the noise to a minimum in the hallways, and in elementary schools, it's usually fairly quiet in the hallways, but we're talking different levels of students there, so elementary kids, you don't typically have lockers you get to worry about, typically. Middle school, everybody would go to their locker if that was the case because they tend to go in groups there. I said we're using 9th grade, so we're using 9th grade. So I have to deal with all the kids rushing by, bumping into me. I'm having to remember my locker combination. I'm trying not to drop my stuff. What class do I have after lunch? Because I'm gonna go ahead and get that book now, right? And my homework now to put in my bag because after lunch, I gotta go to the bathroom because I always gotta go to the bathroom after lunch. And I'm not gonna have time to go to my locker and I don't need to be tardy again because I've already got 2 tardies and if I get a 3rd tardy, I get detention. So now I got my lunch, my brown bag lunch. I go to the cafeteria with the rest of the class. I look around, where do I sit? If you're like me, okay, this is a side note, but I promise you, like 1 minute. Again, I wasn't diagnosed until, I was diagnosed ADHD when I was 45, I was diagnosed autistic when I was, 44, diagnosed autistic when I was 45, all right, 47 now. In 7th, 8th, 9th grade, when I say I had no friends, I literally mean I had no friends. I had no peers my own age in the school that were friends with me. That includes my sister who was 2 years younger at the same elementary school and eventually the same high school, okay? That's not a poor pitiful Stewart story, that's just a fact story. So, we walk in, see I told you, just 1 minute. We walk back into the cafeteria with our brown bag, with our lunch that was packed, and I promise you it's the same thing that you've had for the last 3 years, and it's delicious, and nobody wants to change it, except your mom. Your mom thinks you should change it. But you look around, where do you sit, right? You got the indoor seats. We've already established it's bright and sunny outside. You could sit outside if your school has outdoor seating. But it's really bright outside, and it's really hot, and you're gonna sweat. And if you sweat, you're gonna smell, and then you gotta sit in class the next period, and then people are gonna smell you, and you know that because they've made fun of you already for it. So where do you sit? Or have you already established a routine where you're like, hey, I sit at this table at the very end because nobody else sits there, right? Or is there no room? Because a lot of these places, they have outdoor seating because there's not enough room, or if it's raining, you might have to go into the commons area for seating. So you've got to figure that one out. If everything's full by the time you get there, where do you sit? If you have to sit by people, how do you make that decision? How do you know who's friendly, who's not? Who's going to make fun of you, who's not? I didn't know people made fun of me. That was one of my things. Like, I thought I was included in the group. Week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, some of the scenarios, like I was in my 40s before I realized I was getting bullied in high school because I just didn't realize it, right? That's the way a lot of the bullies operate, by the way, if you didn't know that. It looks like inclusion, so teachers don't catch it, but it's not. I'm going to stop here because we could keep going and going and going. But somebody either shout it out or raise your hand. What part of that whole scenario that we just went through was academic? Basically none of it, right? Not directly. There was no expected learning going on that whole scenario, right? I mean, there could have been some learning. I know for me, if I'm leaving math class, I'm replaying that conversation in my head. I'm replaying those problems, but that's just a me thing. There's no expected learning. So we don't have anything in academics for this what we just talked about. What about sensory? There's a couple of obvious ones that I made sure to make obvious, like smells. I didn't mention smells, but smells, oh my God. Cafeterias? But the bright light outside, the temperature change, right? Hallways, noisy hallways, crowded hallways, people touching you, brushing by. That's a lot, there's a lot. And we could make a whole list, but we don't have time. Executive functioning, working memory. Lunch, which lunch line? Locker combination, class after. Yeah, there's more. I know some of y'all were saying other things. You were mumbling, I couldn't hear you. Social. Where do I sit? Who's gonna be nice to me? Give me something that I didn't say that was social.
Sometimes people stop and talk in the hallway.
All the talking in the hallway. That's social. You have to decode all of that while you're in the hallway. Even though you're not making a decision to talk to somebody or somebody's not talking to you directly, you still have to decode all of that. Yes, sir? Doing what other people are doing, right? That's social decoding, and it's also masking. You want to appear normal. You want to look like everybody else. You want to do what everybody else is doing because you want to be part of it. And you don't necessarily want to be part of it to be cool. You want to be part of it so you're not ostracized. Yes, ma'am? Absolutely. Yeah, so if you didn't hear her, she was saying like reading other people's faces, reading other people's body language, trying to figure out, hey, is she going to be mean to me, or is she going to be nice to me, or is she going to be neutral to me? Right? Safety. It really, when it comes down to a lot of it, it's personal safety. Do I feel safe? How can I make myself feel safe? Right? And I know as the teacher education, like I went through Clemson in the 90s, and I know a lot of teachers that went through various universities more recently, but student safety is still something that they talk about. None of this is what they talk about. All of this matters when it comes to student safety. And this applies to autistic students especially, but also regular students too. Like when I say regular, that was a poor choice of words. Non-autistic students too. Yes, ma'am. Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. If we see other kids packing up and we follow suit because we're concerned about these other things, we might have missed the homework assignment. We might have missed that last step in the problem that we needed to understand because the teacher was still teaching it when everybody else was packing up. So there was a little bit of academics in there. Good catch. Good catch. Have I beat this dead horse enough? Okay, we'll move on. So this is what we just did. I just didn't change the slide. So the audit, the handout, that you either have a copy of or you downloaded or you just don't care about and you're getting kind of sleepy after lunch. If you missed it, there's a short link code for the handout too if you want it. It's the same, there's nothing different about it. It's just if you missed it the first time. But this is not a checklist. I did not make a checklist. There are so many checklists in a teacher's life that are, frankly, most of them are useless. This is a guided way of looking at the environment. In your classroom, in your school, doesn't have to be in your classroom, in your school. It could be at your house. Like if you have a child that's autistic, a lot of this thought process can apply to your house. If you work in an after-school care program, same thought process. Any kind of place where autistic people exist, same thought process, okay? It's warm in here. So, the first thing on the lens list, not checklist, is what's assumed versus what's visible. And the picture I put up here is a classroom with hands raised because I think that's a very obvious example that hopefully kind of makes the point clear. I didn't ask this at the beginning. Teachers, raise your hand. It's like, okay. And the rest of us are parents, caregivers, supports, interested individuals. Okay. Again, this can apply to many different situations. But in a classroom, typically, if you want to be called on in America, because surprisingly, like in other countries, raising your hand is not a thing. I didn't know that until just like real recently. But in America, it's a thing. North America, actually, is a thing. But, raise your hand if you want to be called on. If you have a question, raise your hand. If you have a comment to add to the conversation, raise your hand. How many of you guys, either as teachers or when you were coming through school at some point, you were supposed to raise your hand, but then there were also times where you didn't have to raise your hand and it was not punished, it was not against the rules to say stuff out loud without raising your hand? Did anybody ever explain to you when that was that you did not have to raise your hand and when it was that you had to raise your hand? Was that ever explained to you explicitly? I got my South Carolina high school diploma, got my undergrad at Clemson, I got my master's at Clemson. I did all my PhD work and research at Mississippi State. I have had a lot of schooling, and nobody in that 26 years in school did anybody ever explain to me, hey, you don't have to raise your hand in this kind of a scenario, but in this kind of a scenario you do, and we can be, very clearly establish that. There were times where, a lot of times it's just somebody blurts something out, and the teacher's like, yes, that was a good answer, okay, and we move on. And there was no punishment, there was no negative consequence. But I was sitting there going like, wait a minute, she didn't raise her hand. And it's not me being like a stickler to the rules or anything like that, but I did not understand, if I'm supposed to raise my hand, why didn't she? So, when I say, is it assumed, or what is assumed rather than what is visible, if you're gonna have, if a school is gonna have situations where here are the rules, but we have this little, section of exceptions, why can't we explain what those exceptions are? If we're gonna have on the board up in front of every classroom you have from first grade to 12th grade, raise your hand, why not below that, unless we're in open discussion, unless we're doing this, unless we're doing that, right? Make it visible. That's an easy change. That's an easy fix. None of these things that I'm gonna talk about are gonna be hard fixes for teachers. And I'm gonna address one of them that would be really hard, and I'm gonna let you off the hook for it, because I don't know how people are gonna do it. Working memory. So what must be held internally? And yes, I just mentioned that rules are on the board a lot of times, so that's one thing that usually is done. Like, Even up until 12th grade, usually the expectation is on the teacher to post rules, right? Make them visible so the kids can't. Honestly, that's a legal thing. So the kids can't say, well, I didn't know, the teacher never told me the rules, but they're on the board. So now, when they break a window, they know that that's against the rules or whatever. But typically they're on the board, somewhere in the room, up in front, where everybody can see them. But half the time it's like 3 rules, right? But there's a lot more rules at school. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like bell schedules. Those might be posted, but they're gonna be so tiny, you're not seeing those 3 rows back. So now I have to remember when class is over so that I can make sure that if I need to use the restroom, then I can plan all that beforehand. If you go to lab, you've got safety rules that are not gonna be posted because it's a notebook this thick of safety rules in labs, right? So I've got to hold all that in my memory. I've got to hold procedures in my memory. If I have an English teacher that expects, 5-paragraph essays, and the first paragraph has to be an introduction, the last one has to be the conclusion, and the middle ones are the body of the essay. I was a science teacher, so I'm doing really good to use those words. I've got to keep that in my memory unless she puts it on every single assignment. And when we talk about assignments, if I give verbal instructions to my students, now the students have to hold the instructions in their memory if I don't write them down. So that's what I mean by the verbal memory kind of stuff. I mean, the verbal memory, the working memory, what must be held internally. So anything that you can write down, write it down. Make it so that we can externalize our working memory as much as possible for our students. Does that make sense? You probably already have it in your lesson plans, assuming you do lesson plans. And even at home, the same kind of a scenario applies. If we can externalize as much as possible, then that means less has to be managed internally. Sensory. This was going to be the coolest demo, inadvertent demo that nobody would see until I clicked the button. But it's bright in here. Like, it's really bright in here. And it's loud. Like, I don't know if that's bothering anybody else, but because we're going to have this bright white, because I've been doing, all these dark slides, right? Then I'm going to tell you why I was doing it here in a second, because I think it's neat, and you may not care, but whatever. So this is going to be bright, and I'm just like, oh man, that kind of hurts my eyes, but I'm not going to say anything. And then I was going to click over to this and say, that's better, right? If you look at research, human being research, actually eye research, mammal research, white text on dark background is naturally comfortable. Black text on white background, which is what you see most of the time, even today at this conference, every session I've been in has been some sort of colored text on a white background. It's easy. It's the default, right? I don't know why it's the default. It doesn't have to be. It's not like we're printing this stuff. White text, light text on dark background, easier on the eyes, less sensory, jarring. Does anybody know the reason why? This is the fun fact. If you learn nothing else, this is a fun fact for you. Does anybody know why kind of the universal standard anymore is black text, white background? I thought I heard it. Printing. Just took it from books and magazines and everything else and just threw it onto the digital. Nobody ever thought about it when they were designing it. Yes, ma'am.
So my son has started to refuse to wear his noise canceling headphones in class because now he's saying, well, none of the other kids have them. But he wants them, but he doesn't want to wear them because the other kids. Like, how do you get around it?
So the question was, her son has noise canceling headphones, takes them to class with him, but he doesn't want to wear them in class because nobody else is wearing them in class.
He used to, but like now more he doesn't want to, and his reasoning was other kids don't.
That's a hard one. And again, as I said before, I'm not a therapist, not a psychiatrist. As a teacher, to me, that speaks to the social aspect of everything, especially with his reason of other kids aren't wearing them, so I don't want to wear them and look different and be othered. So that's a hard one. And that's a lot, especially when you have like IEPs and different accommodations. a lot of students, especially in the middle school and high school, and I don't know, how old's your son?
He's 9. He's in 3rd grade.
Okay, so in 3rd grade and up, you know, they see that they're getting something different, or they're having to do, or asked to do something different, even if it's extra time on a test. You know, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, go to your resource teacher and you can take your test. That's, you guys know the social situation at schools, and in general. Anytime that you're othered, that's gonna be negative coming back on you. And that's just a fact. It's a sad fact, and I wish it wasn't, but that's probably what he's noticing, is that somebody made a comment. That's my guess, I don't know. And now he's like, hey, I don't want people making comments. I don't know how to get around it, to be honest with you. A good therapist. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
There's this thing called blue earplugs, and they can go in your ear. You can even get them in like new colors, and they essentially take the noise down a notch, but they're very like not very noticeable. Target a while back had some in their like $5 section at the front of the store. It was something like knockoff brand, but Loop is what you can look up on Amazon.
That's a great thought. I have loop earplugs. Yeah.
What we had to implement in our building was we had a classroom community meeting. So each one of our teachers, on each grade level, the kids with disabilities are spread out amongst the class. So every teacher gets the love. And that's an expectation at the beginning of the year that we have the community meeting and let the students in the class know, hey, we all may look the same. Some of us are different. So based on the demographics of our classroom setting, we address scenarios that help the students to understand those situations when they arise. So that has been very, very impactful. This year we kind of went full force with it this academic year, and we have seen a decrease in the students not wanting to wear their headphones or not wanting to use special bathroom privilege or things of that nature. It's more of a buddy system. The students will be like, hey, it's time to do whatever, and then they will get up freely and go. So that's probably more of something that you can address with the classroom teacher, is to see whether or not she can.
That's a great point too. I know there was a couple of situations where it was frequent bathroom use and stuff that I had in my 9th grade class. And, you know, I would let them go freely, and the other kids would say stuff to me like, hey, why does she get to go? And I'm like, hey, have your parents come to school, meet with me, and we'll talk about it, and then you can go too. Well, I don't want my parents coming to school. You know, so it was a way to quell it without doing that. But in high school, it's going to be different than, you know, the lower grades. But yeah, that was a good point with the loop headphone, or earbuds, or earplugs. I have them. I love them. They're actually in my bag right now. Masking. So that kind of leads into that, like the conversation we just had. Masking pressure. And I feel like if anybody's not familiar with what masking kind of means, raise your hand, we'll go over it. If not, we'll just assume everybody's fairly familiar. Okay, great. We're talking about masking with the teachers too. Because looking back, I totally did that because I found acceptance and praise from teachers because I could be, I was smart, I am smart. Although sometimes when I drop remotes and cough into a microphone, it doesn't seem that way. I would mask for the teachers, right? I gave up masking for my peers because they were gonna call me weird no matter what, but the teachers weren't gonna call me names. The teachers were never gonna be like overtly mean to me, except for that one 5th grade teacher I had. If you wanna hear a great story, I'll tell it, but not publicly. You know, so monitoring my facial expressions during class, not looking confused because I don't know if everybody else is confused. Trying to figure out how to look people in the eye. That's a big one sometimes. You know, picking a spot on their face. And it's not gonna be their teeth, because if they have something gross in their teeth, oh my gosh, that's worse than looking them in the eye. And how do you tell somebody they have something in their teeth? Like, that's a legit question. If anybody has a good response, it's like, meet me afterwards, I'll tip you or whatever. You know, so eye contact, monitoring facial expression. Suppressing stems, like if you're a leg shaker, right? Like my wife, You know, sometimes teachers will, hey, you need to sit still. Okay, now I can't focus because all I want to do is bounce my leg, and it wasn't making noise. I was careful not to make noise, but that's all I can focus on now is not bouncing my leg. I can't focus on the class. Prioritizing looking fine because you don't want to seem like you're not. It's not safe to not seem fine, right? What's the response? If I see you in the hallway or walking downtown tomorrow and I was like, hey, how you doing? What are you going to say? Hey, I'm good, I'm fine, right? That's everybody's response. Everybody's fine all the time. It's weird. I'll say it. It's weird that everybody's always fine. But for us to be okay, to feel safe, we need to appear fine. And that takes a lot of effort, especially if you don't feel safe and you don't feel okay and it's too hot. And that is the loudest air conditioning unit I've ever heard in my life. And I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's a plane flying over like every 10 minutes. And the AC unit's right over there, over that corner. Ask me how I know, okay? Yeah, I can hear the lights. I can hear electricity in my house. My wife thought I was crazy until she started looking into it. She's like, oh, I guess you could do that, huh? I don't have super hearing. My brain doesn't feel. Let me pull back for a second. For those of you that you don't know, sometimes, especially in autistic and other neurodiverse people, they're like me, where my brain doesn't filter noises. I hear everything all the time. I never get acclimated to it. It never stops. So like, I know from my parents, my sister, my wife, you know, they'll hear a noise like a rattling or something like that, and after a minute or two, it doesn't change much, it's always there. They don't even hear it anymore. It gets louder for me sometimes. Your students could be the same way. And remember, we're talking about students that may or may not be known to you. So all of this applies to all students in general. All of this would be beneficial to all students. Autistic students would benefit the most, in my opinion. But when we actually, this is what I was saying back at the beginning of the presentation, when we look for performance-based things, this is heavy on this one, right? Participation, following rules, anything that is a performance-based, not a graded base, that, you know, we expect students, we want students to do. In elementary school, you know, you get grades on classroom behavior, right? For me, it was the satisfactory, unsatisfactory. I don't know if they still do that or not, but you know, anytime a participation or any kind of performance is what you're evaluating, this one's huge. This one's huge. All of this is huge, but this one, I almost didn't use this picture, but I'm gonna tell you why, and then I'm gonna go to the next slide where it actually has words. When the context shifts, all my life, including now, people say, hey, it's always better to tell the truth. It's always better to tell the truth, right? I'm married. I've been with my wife for over 20 years. We got married officially in 2011. I know, and I'm gonna tell you how I know this too in a second. I know that when she tries on something and she says, do I look fat in this? Or actually, she doesn't say that. She says, does this make me look fat? But either way, I know the correct answer is no. You look beautiful, baby. I can't believe I'm such a lucky guy to you chose me among all the other people out there to marry. I am the luckiest person in the world, and you are the most beautiful woman in the world. No, that does not make you look fat. That is the correct answer. If you did not know that, write it down. The reason I say that is because when the context shifts, it's not always obvious. I learned that response probably from watching Friends. Okay? I learned a lot of my social skills, if you will, from TV shows, from movies, right? And some of them work well, some of them don't. The ones that don't, I had to relearn the hard way. But when the rules change, this is like we talked about before too, there's usually not any kind of like delineation between, okay, you gotta follow the rule, you gotta tell the truth, all the way up to here. And then if you cross over this line, then it's okay to tell a white lie. It's okay to tell a softer version to spare somebody's feelings. To me, that doesn't make any sense, right? If I'm supposed to tell the truth, I should tell the truth. Also, for me, it doesn't make any sense because I would rather you tell me the truth. Because if this jacket makes me look fat, and I'm gonna be up in front of 100-ish people, I wanna know that so I can get a different jacket, right? Don't spare my feelings. Tell me the truth. But 90% of people out there are not that way. And 90% of people out there know these expectations, know these context changes just innately through whatever magic works in their brain, because it doesn't work in mine. But when the rules change invisibly, flexibility, like with the raising of hands, but then sometimes you can just blurt things out in class, that becomes mental load. Because I've got to figure out when that is. I've got to figure out why that happened. Does that make sense? You got it? Okay. So, this is what I said at the beginning, and we're almost at the end for questions. Where's my helper lady? How much time do I got? 5 minutes? I got 10 minutes. Sweet. I'm gonna ramble for another story. Now I'm gonna get a drink of water. I'm not sick. My throat gets dry. Like I said before, I taught in the classroom for 4.5 years. I came out, I became an instructional facilitator, did that for about 3 years, and then got hired by the neighboring district and worked there, the district office, in one department or multiple. I'm just going to tell you. When I finally left, under good terms, I left on my own decision, I had 7 budgets and 3 departments under me. It was a small school district, so it was a lot of hats kind of situation. And it wasn't fun anymore. And I didn't know I was neurodivergent at the time, and I didn't know I was about 3 years past burnout at the time. Because a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, I just learned to suppress it and just keep looking normal, keep looking fine. But there'd be days I'd come home from work and I would just go to sleep on the couch because I was done. I was done. Weekends, weekends were not restful. Weekends were stressful about what's coming the next week. Vacations, summer break. Well, as a district office, I didn't get summer break, but there was no rest because I didn't know how to do that. I didn't understand how my brain worked. But what I noticed, especially at the district level and then also at the state level, is there's always an answer because somebody always wants to sell you a new product or a new intervention or a new tutorial or a new software program that'll fix that problem that you were having. And so school districts love to add things because it looks really good on paper. Hey, we just bought this $5,000 piece of software to help our students do X, Y, Z. Look at what we're doing. We're going to be so great. They have research behind that software. The software is going to help their math scores, right? It's adding more, adding more, adding more. What's half the stuff we've talked about? More than half the stuff we talked about today. It's pulling back, pulling back, pulling back. If we can pull back on things that are increasing the load on our students, then we can see that learning has more they're more capable of spending that same energy on learning. That's the whole point I'm trying to make today. Does that make sense? I skipped this slide because it made more sense. But with the handout, since this is a workshop, What I suggest, and I want to make sure this is clear because I don't expect people to take this handout to go back to their classroom, go back to their house, go back to their after school program, go back to wherever you're going to want to try this out and be like, okay, we've got to fix this. Pick one thing to change. And I'm going to say this too, it's not on the slides. You can pick it by thinking through the stuff we've been talking about today, or I'm going to make a really not common suggestion. Ask the autistic person. If you know they're autistic and you know that this is what this is for, ask them, right? Like nobody ever, in my experience, let me just say that. And again, was not a special ed teacher, did not work in that field. Until actually, when I was at the district office, I worked directly under the assistant principal who was over special education, ESOL, and about 4 other things. But so I worked a lot with special ed classrooms then. But a lot of times the decisions are made for students instead of with students, right? So, you know, they can let you know stuff if they know it's okay to tell you, or if they know you're asking them, because a lot of times they don't even know to say stuff. I didn't know to say stuff when I was a kid, but just choose one thing and make a change, and then see how it goes. Right? Don't try to change a whole bunch of stuff. Change one thing, see how it goes. It might work. It might not. Try not to change it in a way that would make it worse if it doesn't work. But, you know, change one thing, see if it works. And when I say see if it works, give it a week or 2. Because guess what else is hard for autistic people? Change. So if you're going to change something, you're going to have a transition period between like, oh my gosh, why is this different? Okay? That's a little bit of extra load, but hopefully in the long run, we've made it better. If it doesn't help, drop back, try again. It's not a quick process, and I never promised you that. But the more that we're aware as the adults in the students' lives of some of this stuff, the more we can be proactive at helping make it easier. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, go ahead. That's a big one. Absolutely. Yeah, no, you actually said it very well. What she said was for her son, she asked the teachers to just let him be for the first 5 minutes of class so he could kind of process that transition. As opposed to like jumping right on top of him, talking to him, engaging him right from the start. And then also, oh my gosh, it just went on my brain. Doodle, thank you. There's actually been some recent research. Last year and this year, there's 2 different papers that got published talking about like doodling, increasing focus for especially for ADHD, but autistic as well. Other neurodiverse people probably fit in that category as well. But you know, engaging something, because the lack of stimulation in the brain is almost as bad as overstimulation. And so being able to doodle or things like that while you're paying attention, while you're focusing, actually increases frontal lobe activity, which increases your ability to focus. So doodling during class, doodling during notes, doodling during board presentations, definitely a big help. Yes, ma'am. There's always one teacher. Absolutely, every teacher needs to be on the page for something like that. But then also, my question, and former district administrator, I could ask teachers this questions. Prove he wasn't listening. Show me the evidence that he wasn't listening. Until then, back off. Yeah. But I know sometimes we don't have that control as parents or as teachers. Unless it's a teacher, we're the teacher in question. But anyway, these are different ways you can reach me. That is also today's slides, same as the front one. Question and answer time. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned earlier about or as an example, someone bobbing their leg and then asking us to stop. So how do you navigate when you have someone who needs the physical movement with someone who is also maybe in class who is overly aware of extra movement? What are your suggestions for navigating spaces when you have multiple sensory needs?
Locked cubicles.
Okay, well,
I'm just kidding. No, the question was, if you didn't hear it, my example of somebody bouncing their leg, needing that movement, doodling is the same kind of thought process. Versus, and you have the same classroom with somebody who is very aware of all the little movements. The like me personally, if somebody clicks their pen, or taps something, oh my gosh. I'm not a violent person, but the thoughts that go through my head. When I was in the classroom is the best example I can give, is how I dealt with it, and it seemed to go well. Other people can voice up if they have examples. But I told all of my students from day one, if you need to get up and not be sitting, for whatever reason, I didn't say why, there's the back of the classroom, have at it. And I had an area in the back of the classroom that was, to the best of my ability, out of view of the rest of the classroom, right? So they were behind the class, so unless somebody turned in their desk to look at that person, even if it was the class clown wanting to just get back there and cut the fool, I would see the people turning around to go look, right? If it became a bigger issue where it was somebody who really kind of legitimately needed to stand up and walk around or just stand during class, and it was bothering somebody, I would nonchalantly change the seating arrangements or just change the, I wasn't going to call anybody out. I wasn't going to make it obvious. But I gave them the freedom to make choices. And I taught ninth grade, so that could be different if you're in a different grade level. Hey, if you need to get up and stand as opposed to falling asleep at your desk, and that's how I presented it. So it was ubiquitous, benign. Go in the back of the classroom. You're still responsible for all the work, but you can go back there, you can stand, you can pace, whatever you need to do. But I made sure that all the other seats were far enough away and facing exactly the opposite way. So that's what I did, and it seemed to work. But sometimes you got to get creative, because sometimes you got 35 kids in a classroom that's built for 20. Public education sucks sometimes. Yes?
A little bit more to that, and I think you're already on the right track, is that that's kind of like an opportunity for teaching them advocacy for themselves. So I have a little boy that's a stimmer, and he's doing all of the Star Wars from last night, and then I have other students who are like, I cannot concentrate because you are bothering me. So, and then there's no perfect answer, but it's kind of using that opportunity at least for them to both, yes, this is hard, okay, I'll try and whisper, or can you whisper instead, or I don't know.
No, and that's a good point.
In the moment, using it somehow, there's no perfect answer.
Yeah, no. One, you're absolutely correct. No perfect answer. Two, that's a good point to teach them, because you're younger grade level, right?
I'm elementary.
Yeah. That's a great opportunity then. Once we're in high school, it's a little different. But excellent point. Yes, ma'am.
I want to add on just a little bit. I don't have a child that is diagnosed with autism. However, you cannot tell me that he is not on the spectrum. But he's like the sit down and read. He can't sit down at a desk. So when he was in elementary school, he was a behavior problem. He got referrals, ISS, and to the point that he got OSS because he would not sit down during ELA time. Very fluent reader, but he just couldn't sit down. And because he did not qualify for any services, he would not get any services. So as a parent, I got the flex stand desk because I paid for it with my own money.
Bless your heart.